E.N.D here. When Rivals of Ixalan, the second set in the first Ixalan block, was released, it introduced us a mechanic called Ascend. Now that soon will go back on Ixalan thanks to the lost caverns of Ixalan. Why not? Let's revisit this particular mechanic, which in my opinion it's perfect for commander players, as it unlocks various bonuses when players achieve the city blessing. Ascend unlocks different bonuses on different cards if you have the city's blessing. Ascend always looks at the current game state, not the past. If Ascend is on a permanent, it constantly checks to see whether you control 10 or more permanents. The moment you do, you get the city blessing. When Ascend appears on instants and sorceries, it checks if you control 10 or more permanents only once, as the spell resolves. Ascend doesn't use this tech and can't be responded to, but note, this only is relevant if the land is the 10th permanent, as the only special action that adds a permanent. The permanent with Ascend has to be under your control to check. Once you have the city blessing, you keep it for the rest of the game. Multiple players can all have the city blessing at the same time. But how do you play Ascend? First of all, what are your permanents? Lands are permanents. Let's put these three lands here. Creatures and tokens are permanents. Artifacts are permanents. Enchantments are permanents. Battle cards are permanents. Let's put it there. And last but not least, planeswalkers are permanents. Now let's cast Twilight Prophet. Twilight Prophet 2 and 2 black, flying with Ascend. At the beginning of your upkeep, if you have the city's blessing, reveal the top card of your library and put it into your hand. Each opponent loses X life and you gain X life, where X is that card's converted mana cost. Let's put Twilight Prophet on the battlefield. Remember that when you cast a card with Ascend, it will go on the stack. There can be a response, there can be a counter, nothing happens and it will hit the battlefield. To get the city's blessing, I need 10 permanents. Currently, I have only 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Now, I'm going to put a land in play. This will be my 10th permanent. Let's put it there. When I have 10 permanents or more, and I have, in this case, Twilight Prophet with Ascend, I will get the city blessings. Now that I have the city's blessing, thanks to Twilight Prophet, I will reveal the top card of my library. I will put it into my hand and each opponent will lose X life and I gain X life, where X is that card converted mana cost. Remember that once you have the city's blessing, you will keep it for the rest of the game. If I don't have 10 permanents anymore, let's say this token dies, I will still keep the city's blessing. Some notes. Once you have the city's blessing, you have it for the rest of the game. As said, even if you lose control of some of your permanents. The city blessing isn't a permanent itself and can be removed by any effect. A permanent is any object on the battlefield including, as said, tokens and lands. Spells and emblems aren't permanents. If you cast a spell with Ascend, you don't get the city blessing until it resolves. Players may respond to that spell by trying to change whether you get the city blessing. Ascend on a permanent isn't a triggered ability and doesn't use this tech. Players can respond to a spell that will give you your 10th permanent, but they can't respond to getting the city blessing once you control the 10th permanent. This means that if your 10th permanent is a land you play, players can't respond before you get the city blessing. If you control 10 permanents but don't control a permanent or resolving spell with Ascend, you don't get the city blessing. For example, if you control 10 permanents, lose control of one, then cast Golden Demise, you won't have the city blessing and this spell will affect creatures you control. If your 10th permanent enters the battlefield and then a permanent leaves the battlefield immediately afterwards, most likely due to the legend rule or due to being a creature with 0 toughness, you get the city blessing before it leaves the battlefield. Some cards, like my Twilight Prophet, have triggered abilities with an intervening if clause that checks whether you have the city's blessing. You must already have the city's blessing in order for these abilities to trigger, otherwise they do nothing. In other words, there's no way to have the ability triggered if you don't have the city blessing, even if you intend to get it in response to the triggered ability. Some cards have triggered abilities that check if you have the city's blessing, but don't use an intervening if clause. These abilities trigger regardless of whether you have the city's blessing and check whether you do only as they resolve. Some cards get power, toughness and or abilities once you have the city's blessing. If another card has an ability that triggers when creatures with certain characteristics enter the battlefield, such as Mentor of the Meek, use the entering permanent characteristics after you have the city's blessing to determine whether those abilities trigger. This is true even if the entering permanent is your 10th permanent. So this is how you play Ascend, an interesting mechanic from the first Ixalan block. Leave me a comment below. Do you think Ascend will appear in the Lost Caverns of Ixalan? And as always, subscribe button here, subscribe for my channel for more and more interesting videos about Magic the Gathering and the collectible world.